Daniel Carter had always believed that fatherhood meant sacrifice. For years, he put his savings, his time, and his energy into raising his two children, Ava and Jacob. At 42, Daniel was no stranger to hard battles, but none of them compared to the exhausting custody fight that had consumed the last 4 years of his life. His ex-wife, Melissa, had remarried, and her new husband pushed her to pursue a custody dispute. What should have been about the children became a legal war fueled by Melissa's wealthy father, who covered all of her legal fees without blinking. Daniel, on the other hand, drained his life savings, $165,000, to keep his children close. It wasn't money he threw around carelessly, it was everything he had worked for. The court fight left scars not just on his finances, but on his heart. The kids were caught in the middle, asked to share their preferences with court-appointed therapists. Ava, now 16, said she wanted to live with her mother full-time and only visit her father every other weekend. Jacob, 14, hesitated at first, asking for a 50-50 split, but later changed to 70-30 in favor of his mom, hoping it would bring the court battle to an end. Daniel's lawyer fought with passion, but when the judge handed down the decision, it crushed him. The judge claimed that at their age the children's voices carried weight, and separating the siblings would damage their bond. Daniel lost what he had fought for so fiercely, and in that loss came a quiet, lingering grief. Months passed, and Daniel tried to adjust to the reduced time he had with his kids. He poured his energy into building a new life with his wife, Hannah, who had been his anchor through the storm. Together, they decided to plan something special, something just for them. Hannah's sister and her husband invited them to join a group trip with close friends, 9 days across Spain and France, an adventure they had saved and dreamed about for years. When the children learned about the trip, curiosity quickly turned to desire. Ava asked first, her voice edged with impatience of a teenager, why couldn't they come along? Jacob, too, pressed with hope in his eyes, eager at the thought of traveling overseas for the first time. They wanted to taste adventure, to see the world beyond the borders of their quiet American town. Daniel tried to explain. It wasn't a family trip, it was something different, something planned with adults in mind. But Ava was sharp, and she caught on to the detail he hadn't wanted to emphasize. Their cousin, Olivia, just 15, would be going. The news made the disappointment sting even more. Both children argued that it was unfair. They knew their father could afford it, and they insisted this might be their only chance to travel internationally before adulthood. Daniel listened, but his heart wrestled with conflicting emotions. Finally, he told them the truth in words that cut deeper than he expected. They were old enough now to understand choices, and choices carry consequences. They had chosen to live mostly with their mother, and now this was part of the result. Ava's face hardened with anger. Jacob's eyes filled with hurt. The room felt heavy with their silence, until Jacob muttered that their dad was just bitter because they had more fun at their mom's house. That one stung worse than anything Daniel had endured in court. He knew his children saw him differently now. He wondered if he had gone too far, if holding his ground was wisdom or cruelty. But deep inside, his gut told him this was fair. He had sacrificed enough already, and maybe it was time for them to learn that not every decision in life comes without cost. The air in the Carter home felt heavy after that exchange. Ava stormed off to her room, her phone buzzing in her hand as if she couldn't wait to tell someone how unfair her father was. Jacob lingered on the couch, scrolling absent-mindedly but clearly still upset. Daniel sat there for a while, staring at the muted television, the weight of their words pressing against him. He wanted to go after them, to explain that this wasn't punishment, that he wasn't trying to get even. But he knew how it would sound. In their eyes, he was just the parent who said no, the one who couldn't give them what they thought they deserved. Later that night, Hannah found him sitting at the kitchen table, nursing a cold cup of coffee. She laid a hand on his shoulder and asked softly if he was all right. Daniel shrugged, not trusting his voice at first. They think I'm being cruel, like I'm holding this trip over their heads just because they chose their mom's house. Hannah pulled out the chair across from him. You're not cruel. You're human. You've given them everything you could, Danny. More than most fathers would. But you're allowed to have something for yourself, for us. Daniel wanted to believe her, but guilt gnawed at him. He thought about all the weekends he tried to fill with joy, about the times he rearranged his work schedule just to make soccer practice or sit through school plays. He thought about the quiet car rides when Jacob would tell him about a new video game, or when Ava used to sing along with the radio before she became too self-conscious to do so. Those memories made his chest ache because he feared they were slipping further out of reach. Ava hardly shared anything with him now, unless it was an argument. Jacob still tried, but even he was changing. His loyalties tugged in both directions. The next day, while dropping them off at Melissa's, Ava barely said goodbye. Jacob gave him a half smile, but kept his earbuds in. Daniel watched them walk up the driveway, his throat tight. Melissa stood on the porch, arms crossed, not saying much. She didn't need to. Her presence was reminder enough of the battles they had fought and the ground he had lost. On the drive back home, Daniel replayed Jacob's words over and over. You're just mad we have more fun at Mom's house. Maybe it was true. Maybe the laughter and ease at Melissa's place outshined the quieter rhythm of his home. She had the bigger house, the new stepfather who bought gadgets and sports tickets, the constant bustle of family gatherings. His weekends, in contrast, were slower, simpler. Sometimes he wondered if that simplicity was enough for teenagers who craved excitement. That evening, he tried to distract himself with trip preparations. Hannah spread travel guides and maps across the dining room table, her eyes sparkling as she circled museums and cafes in Barcelona, vineyards in Bordeaux, and narrow streets in Paris she couldn't wait to explore. Daniel smiled and nodded, but inside he carried a storm. Part of him longed to share those adventures with Ava and Jacob, to see their faces light up as they stood in front of the Eiffel Tower or tasted gelato on a warm Spanish night. He could picture Jacob snapping endless photos, Ava posing for the perfect shot. For a brief moment, he almost caved, imagining what it would be like to bring them along. But then the practical voice returned. This wasn't a family trip. It wasn't just about sightseeing. It was about reclaiming a piece of himself, about holding on to the bond with Hannah that had been stretched thin by years of legal battles and stress. And if he gave in now, if he broke the boundary he had set, what lesson would that teach his children about choices, consequences, and respect? Still, when he lay awake that night staring at the ceiling, he couldn't shake the guilt. Parenthood, he thought, was a never-ending test. No matter which choice he made, it felt like failing someone. At Melissa's house, the air was buzzing with activity. Dinner was being set out, roast chicken, mashed potatoes, and a spread that looked like something out of a magazine. Melissa loved entertaining, and her new husband, Richard, thrived on the image of a bustling home. Ava leaned against the counter, scrolling through her phone while Melissa plated food. Jacob hovered nearby, a little restless. Richard clapped a hand on his shoulder. Big game this weekend, right? We'll see if the tickets I score live up to the hype, Richard said with a grin. Jacob brightened at once, nodding. Yeah, thanks again. None of my friends believe I get to see a playoff game live. Melissa's smile deepened. That's what family does. We make memories. Ava sighed loudly, finally lowering her phone. Wish Dad thought that way. He's going on some fancy trip and basically told us we don't deserve to come. Melissa stiffened slightly but tried to keep her expression neutral. He said that? Not in those words, Ava muttered, stabbing at a piece of chicken whence they sat down, but close enough. He said we made our choice to live here and that choices have consequences. Like, what kind of father even says that? Jacob added quietly, and it's not even like it's just adults. Emma's going. She's 15, but we're not invited. Melissa exchanged a look with Richard, one of those silent glances that spoke volumes. Richard leaned back in his chair, his voice low but firm. Your dad has always been stubborn. He thinks life is about teaching lessons, not enjoying it. Melissa reached across the table, patting Ava's hand. Sweetheart, I know that hurts, but maybe he doesn't realize how much it means to you. Ava's eyes glistened with unshed tears, though she quickly blinked them away. He doesn't care. He's mad because we like being here more. He wants to punish us for it. Melissa didn't argue. She let her daughter's words hang heavy in the air, knowing they struck a chord. Later, upstairs, Ava sat on her bed, venting to Jacob. Mom's right. Dad just doesn't get it. He's still mad about court. He doesn't see that we just want things to be normal. Why does he always make it about him? Jacob shrugged, flopping onto the beanbag in the corner. I don't know. I think he's lonely. Like, he's got Hannah, but he still acts like he lost everything. Maybe that's why he wants the trip just for them. Still doesn't make it fair. We're his kids. Shouldn't we come first? Neither of them noticed Melissa standing just outside the door, listening quietly. Her lips pressed together, and though she didn't say anything in that moment, she was already thinking of how she might use their words. Back at Daniel's house, the silence was louder than ever. He went about his week, balancing work and preparing for the trip, but the absence of his children felt sharper. Every time his phone buzzed, he hoped it would be a text from Ava or Jacob. Instead, the messages were short and clipped, or worse, non-existent. One evening, he scrolled through old photos on his laptop, family vacations to Florida, a camping trip by Lake Tahoe, birthdays with messy cakes and wide smiles. In every picture, Ava clung to his side. Jacob beamed up at him like he was the hero of the world. Now those days seemed like they belonged to someone else, someone who hadn't yet spent years in courtrooms, hadn't been told by a judge that his children's wishes outweighed his sacrifices. Hannah walked in quietly, setting a glass of water on the desk. She saw the screen and placed a hand on his shoulder. They still love you, she said softly. Daniel's throat tightened. Do they? Because some days I can't tell. Hannah knelt beside him, forcing him to meet her eyes. Love doesn't disappear just because they're teenagers. It changes shape. They'll push you, they'll blame you, but deep down, they know who you are to them. You've never stopped showing up. He wanted to believe her, but the ache in his chest lingered. He closed the laptop, stood up, and pulled her into a hug. I just don't want them to hate me. You're not giving them less of yourself. You're giving yourself something too, and that's not wrong. But even as she said it, Daniel wondered if his kids would ever see it that way. The days slid closer to the departure date, and with each one, Daniel felt the distance from his kids stretch wider. He tried calling more often, leaving voicemails when they didn't answer. His tone was always upbeat, asking about school, checking in about soccer practice or Ava's debate team, but the responses, when they came, were short and guarded. On Thursday evening, Ava finally picked up. Her voice was flat. Hi, Dad. Hey, sweetheart, Daniel said, relief flooding him. How was your day? Fine. Daniel hesitated. Listen, I know you're upset about the trip. I don't want this to feel like I'm shutting you out. Ava's voice cracked, just lightly. It feels exactly like that. You're going to Europe and leaving us behind, even though we asked to go. What are we supposed to think? Daniel rubbed his forehead. I've been saving for this trip for years. It's something Hannah and I planned with her family. It's not about choosing them over you. But you did choose, Ava snapped. Emma gets to go, and she's just a cousin. Do you even hear yourself? Daniel's chest tightened. Ava, It's complicated. No, it's not. You're punishing us because we live with Mom more. Just admit it. Before he could form a reply, the line went dead. Daniel sat in the silence, staring at his phone as if it might light up again. It didn't. That night, he lay awake long after Hannah had drifted off, staring at the ceiling, replaying Ava's words. The guilt pressed down hard, battling against the stubborn knot of pride that refused to loosen. Choices have consequences. He had said it with conviction, but now it sounded cruel even in his own ears. Meanwhile, Jacob had been confiding more in Melissa. One evening, while they folded laundry together, he asked quietly, "Do you think Dad even likes being around us anymore?" Melissa's hands stilled on the towel she was folding. "Of course he does, honey. Why would you think that?" Jacob shrugged. "Because he's always happier when it's just him and Hannah. When we're there, he's on edge. But when it's just them, they do fun stuff. Trips, dinners. Like, we're just extra." Melissa's heart pinched. She wanted to reassure them, but the bitterness she felt toward Daniel sometimes won over. She smoothed the towel, choosing her words carefully. "Your dad loves you, but he's also dealing with a lot of disappointment. Sometimes grown-ups don't handle it the right way." Jacob nodded, but didn't look convinced. On Saturday before Daniel's flight, both kids came over for their scheduled weekend. The atmosphere was tense from the moment they walked in. Ava barely said hello. Jacob tossed his backpack down and headed straight to his room. Daniel tried to salvage the evening by making homemade pizzas, something they used to love doing together. He laid out the toppings, called everyone to the kitchen, and put on some music. Hannah joined in, trying to lighten the mood, but Ava crossed her arms, refusing to help. "Why are we even here?" she muttered. "You don't want us around anyway." Daniel set down the spoon he was holding. "Ava, that's not true." "Then prove it," she shot back. "Take us with you." The room went quiet. Jacob shifted uncomfortably, glancing between his dad and sister. Daniel's voice was steady, but heavy. "This trip isn't about leaving you behind. It's about something Hannah and I wanted to do. I'm allowed to have parts of my life that aren't just about you." Ava's jaw tightened. "Wow, thanks for spelling it out." She stormed off to her room, slamming the door behind her. Jacob stayed behind, staring at the counter. "Dad, maybe you should just let us come. You'd feel better too." Daniel's throat felt dry. "It's not that simple, buddy." Jacob shook his head, grabbed a slice of bread, and followed his sister. Hannah stepped up beside Daniel, laying a hand on his back. "They're hurting, but they'll come around." Daniel wished he could believe that. He looked at the unfinished pizzas, at the quiet kitchen that used to be filled with laughter, and wondered if the bond he once had with his kids was slipping away for good. By the time Sunday rolled around, Ava refused to come out of her room for breakfast. Jacob ate quietly, answering in short phrases. When Melissa pulled into the driveway to pick them up, neither child hugged their father goodbye. They just walked to the car, shoulders tense, faces shut tight. Daniel stood at the window watching them go, his heart heavy. The plane ticket sat on his desk upstairs, a reminder of the trip that was supposed to be exciting. Instead, it felt like a wedge driving deeper between him and his children. The morning of the trip arrived with an air of nervous energy. Daniel moved through the house in a quiet haze, double-checking the luggage, making sure passports and tickets were in the folder by the door. Hannah hummed while she zipped up her suitcase, chatting about sightseeing plans and how much she looked forward to seeing Barcelona's old streets. Daniel smiled when she spoke, but inside he carried a heavy knot that refused to untangle. The memory of Ava storming off and Jacob's downcast face replayed in his mind like a film he couldn't stop watching. He kept telling himself this was what he had planned for years, something he deserved after years of court battles and financial strain. But the joy of it was dulled, shadowed by the silence of two teenagers who wouldn't return his calls. At the airport, the group gathered at the terminal. Hannah's sister and brother-in-law, a couple of friends, and Emma, the 15-year-old cousin who was practically bouncing with excitement. She snapped pictures by the gate, chattering about how she'd post them online to show her friends back home. Daniel forced to laugh, trying to catch a little of her energy. But when Emma grinned and said, "This is going to be the trip of a lifetime," he couldn't help picturing Ava's voice in his ear. "Take us with you, then prove you care." The flight itself was long but smooth. Hannah fell asleep against his shoulder. Daniel stared out the small window at the endless stretch of ocean below, wondering if, somewhere deep down, he had made a mistake. By the time they landed in Barcelona, the sunlight was spilling across the city in warm golden waves. The streets were alive with the sound of scooters, chatter, and clinking glasses from cafes. Their hotel overlooked a bustling square where families sat together at outdoor tables, children darting around with cones of melting ice cream. The group checked in, unpacked, and set off almost immediately, eager to make the most of every hour. Hannah's sister wanted to see the Sagrada Familia first. They craned their necks beneath its towering spires, marveling at the details carved into stone. Everyone snapped pictures, smiling wide. Daniel posed for a few, but when he looked back at the photos, all he saw was the empty space where his kids should have been standing. Later at dinner, they gathered around a table heavy with tapas, small plates of olives, ham, cheese, shrimp simmering in garlic oil. Emma laughed as she tried to pronounce the Spanish names on the menu, her cheeks flushing when she got it wrong. Daniel smiled at her effort, but his heart ached. Ava had always been the adventurous one with food, never afraid to try something new. Jacob loved shrimp, used to beg for extra whenever they ordered takeout at home. He found himself staring at the plates, hearing echoes of their voices in his head. That night, back at the hotel, he tried calling. Ava didn't answer. Jacob let it ring twice before declining. Daniel left a voicemail, his voice low. "Hey guys, we made it here safe. Barcelona is amazing. You'd love it. Just wanted to say I miss you." The silence afterwards was louder than anything. As the days passed, the group traveled from Spain into France. They explored quiet villages with cobblestone streets, visited vineyards, wandered through art galleries. Hannah glowed, her happiness radiating as she posed for photos with her sister, sipping wine in the golden light of the countryside. Daniel played along, smiled for pictures, enjoyed the beauty around him, but he carried the weight of absence everywhere he went. Emma teased him one afternoon while they walked through Paris. "Uncle Dan, you're supposed to be on vacation. Why do you always look like you're doing math homework in your head?" The group laughed. Daniel chuckled too, but his chest tightened. If Emma could see through him, then surely everyone else could too. That evening, standing beneath the shimmering lights of the Eiffel Tower, Daniel felt both awe and emptiness. It was everything he had imagined when planning the trip, yet it felt incomplete. Around him, couples kissed, families posed for photos, children pointed in wonder. Hannah leaned against him, her arm tucked around his. But in the back of his mind, he kept seeing Ava and Jacob, scrolling through social media back home, maybe stumbling across a picture of him here, looking like the dad who left them out of something unforgettable. When he lay down that night in the Paris hotel, he reached for his phone again. He typed out a long message, paused, deleted, typed again. Finally, he left a simple note. "I love you both. I'll see you soon. Please don't forget that." He stared at the screen long after he sent it, knowing no reply would come. Paris was alive in a way Daniel had never truly imagined. The streets seemed to hum with history and romance. Cafes spilled out onto sidewalks, the scent of fresh croissants mixing with the sound of accordion players who stood near bridges and street corners. Every detail was a postcard come to life, and yet Daniel felt like a ghost wandering through it all. Hannah and her sister were enchanted. They strolled arm in arm through Montmartre, pointing out artists painting portraits, laughing at caricatures, tasting crepes folded warm in paper. Emma darted ahead with her camera, capturing every corner, every fountain, every delicate Parisian window box bursting with flowers. Daniel followed, smiling when expected, nodding when someone pointed out a sight, but each moment reminded him of the absence at his side. He imagined Ava studying the paintings, her sharp eye picking out details no one else noticed. He could almost hear Jacob muttering under his breath about how slow everyone was walking, then racing ahead only to circle back, impatient to move on. One afternoon, the group boarded a riverboat for a ride down the Seine. The guide pointed out famous bridges, monuments, and palaces as the boat glided through calm waters. Hannah leaned close, whispering how beautiful it all was, her voice carrying that mix of awe and joy Daniel had always loved in her. But Daniel's eyes kept drifting to families on the boat. 2 little girls squealed as their mother lifted them for a better view. A teenage boy sat with his father, taking selfies while his dad chuckled and wrapped an arm around his shoulder. Daniel's chest tightened until it hurt. He turned his head quickly, hoping no one noticed. That night, they climbed the steps to Sacré-Cœur, the white basilica glowing against the evening sky. From the top, Paris stretched endlessly below, a blanket of lights glittering into the distance. Hannah sighed, whispering that it felt magical. Emma was buzzing with excitement, snapping photos and joking that her friends back home would be jealous. Daniel stood still, hands in his pockets, staring at the endless city. The beauty of it pressed against him, yet he couldn't shake the feeling of loss. He thought of Ava, who always dreamed of seeing Europe. She used to talk about it at dinner, naming cities she wanted to visit, museums she wanted to walk through. He thought of Jacob, who loved architecture and once spent an afternoon sketching their house just for fun. They should have been here, standing beside him. Later, while Hannah and her sister browsed shops for souvenirs, Daniel slipped into a quiet coffee cafe. He ordered coffee he barely tasted and pulled out his phone again. He scrolled through his messages, rereading the simple note he had sent the night before. Still, no reply. He clicked into Ava's social media page. She had posted a picture of herself at a school football game, smiling with friends. The caption read, "Best night ever." Daniel's stomach twisted. Was it her way of saying she didn't care that he was gone? Or was it a mask, the same mask he wore now in Paris, smiling when the heart inside felt heavy? Jacob's page had a few updates too, silly memes, a clip of a video game he played. Nothing directed at Daniel, but the silence between them was louder than anything posted. Daniel set the phone down, staring at the untouched cup in front of him. The cafe buzzed with chatter and clinking glasses, but he felt apart from it all. He was in Paris, one of the most beautiful cities in the world, yet he had never felt so distant from what mattered most. The next day, the group visited the Louvre. Tourists crowded around the Mona Lisa, cameras raised high. Daniel stood at the back, staring at the tiny painting behind glass, hearing the hum of voices. Hannah tugged his arm, pointing out sculptures she loved. Emma posed dramatically beside statues, laughing. But Daniel wandered further down the hall, away from the crowd, pausing in front of a massive canvas filled with battle scenes. Soldiers clashed, faces full of emotion, families torn apart in the chaos of war. He stared at it for a long time, thinking about battles of his own, not with swords, but with courtrooms, lawyers, and the invisible tug-of-war over 2 children's hearts. That evening, the group finally made it to the Eiffel Tower. They climbed slowly until they reached the 2nd level, the city spreading beneath them in a sea of lights. Tourists leaned against the railings, taking in the sight, whispering to one another as the tower shimmered with its hourly sparkle. Daniel placed his hands on the railing, staring down. He tried to imagine showing Ava this view, hearing her gasp with delight. He thought about Jacob, who would have been fascinated by the structure itself, peppering him with questions about how it was built. He blinked hard, fighting back the tightness in his throat. Hannah squeezed his hand, sensing his quiet. She asked softly, "Are you okay?" Daniel forced a smile, nodding. "Yeah, just taking it in." But when they returned to the hotel, he sat alone on the balcony for a long time, looking out at the glowing city, listening to the faint sounds of laughter from the streets below. He pulled out his phone one more time, typing a new message. "I know you're upset with me. I understand. I just want you to know that no matter what, I love you. When I get back, let's talk. Please." He hit send, then laid the phone on the table beside him, staring at it as if waiting for it to light up. But the only sound was the distant hum of the city. The trip wound down as quickly as it had begun. 9 days slipped past in a blur of train rides, museums, dinners, and late nights filled with laughter from the group. But for Daniel, each day carried a shadow. Every postcard view, every toast, every shared joke was haunted by the quiet absence of his children. On the flight home, Hannah leaned against him again, sleeping soundly as the plane cut across the Atlantic. Daniel stared into the dark sky beyond the window, thinking about what waited for him. He had pictures and memories tucked away, souvenirs packed in his bag, but none of it felt complete. The silence from Ava and Jacob hung heavy, and the closer they got to home, the harder it pressed against him. When they landed, the familiar smell of coffee and fried food in the airport felt oddly grounding. The group exchanged hugs and promises to share photos soon. Hannah's sister chatted excitedly about printing a photo book. Emma waved goodbye, still glowing from the adventure. Daniel drove Hannah home, the jet lag pulling at them both. They dropped their bags by the door and sank into the couch. For a moment, the house felt strangely empty. The kids weren't due over that evening. The quiet pressed in, thick and uncomfortable. The next day, when Ava and Jacob were scheduled to come by, Daniel braced himself. He had practiced what to say, though nothing felt right. He wanted to tell them about the sights, the food, the moments of beauty. But he also wanted to apologize, though he wasn't sure for what exactly, whether for the decision, for the words he had said before leaving, or for the deeper wound of years spent in a custody battle that had drained so much from them all. When the door opened, Ava walked in first, her arms crossed tight across her chest. Jacob followed, dragging his backpack, his face unreadable. They didn't greet him. They went straight to the living room and sat down on the couch like visitors, not children coming home. Daniel stood there for a moment, unsure. Finally, he took a breath and sat across from them. "I know you're upset with me," he began, his voice steady but soft. "And I don't blame you for feeling that way. I need you to know something, though. That trip, it was planned a long time ago. We saved for it, we coordinated it with Hannah's family. It wasn't about leaving you behind. It wasn't about punishing you." Ava's eyes flicked up, sharp and skeptical. "Then what was it about? Because you could have taken us. You just didn't want to." Daniel winced. "I wanted to. More than anything, I wanted to. But you've been clear, Ava. You said you wanted to spend more time at your mom's. You wanted distance from me. And Jacob, you said you wanted less back and forth. I respected that. I listened. But it'd be a lying if I said it didn't hurt. And when this trip came up, I thought, maybe it was okay to do something for myself for once. Maybe it was okay not to fight for every inch anymore." Jacob shifted, his face softer than his sister's. "But we still wanted to go. You know that, right?" Daniel nodded. "I know. And that's what breaks my heart. Because I can see now I made the wrong call. I thought I was teaching you about choices and consequences, but what I really did was shut you out. And I hate that I did that. The room fell silent. The kids stared at him, their expressions a mix of anger, confusion, and hurt. Hannah, who had stayed quiet until now, stepped into the doorway. She didn't speak, but her presence was steady, a reminder that Daniel wasn't alone in this. Ava finally spoke, her voice lower, less sharp. "You should have fought harder to include us, even if we said stuff before. We're kids. We say things we don't always mean. You're the parent. You're supposed to know better." The words landed heavy, but Daniel didn't argue. He nodded slowly. "You're right. I should have seen that. I let my own hurt get in the way of yours. And I'm sorry. Truly." Jacob rubbed his hands over his knees, glancing at his sister. "So what now?" Daniel leaned forward, his eyes wet but steady. "Now, I learn from this. I don't make the same mistake again. If you still want to travel, we'll plan something together. It won't be Paris or Spain right away, but we'll make something special, something that belongs to us. No one else." The kids exchanged a glance. Ava didn't smile, but her arms loosened, the tension slipping just a little. Jacob gave a faint nod. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a start. Later that night, after the kids went to bed, Daniel sat on the couch beside Hannah. She rested her head against his shoulder, her hand finding his. She whispered, "You did good." Daniel shook his head. "I did what I should have done from the start. I just hope it's not too late." Outside, the night was quiet. The house finally felt whole again, though fragile. Daniel knew the road ahead would be long, full of hard conversations and careful steps. But for the first time in a long time, he felt ready to walk it. Because no trip, no city, no tower of lights could ever compare to the simple truth waiting here at home: his children, their trust, and the chance, no matter how small, to begin again.